Hello guys and welcome for another Aeternum video. I already made 2 episodes for all the beginners out there who just want to understand the mechanics of the game and how the combat system works in New World Aeternum. If you have missed those, I highly suggest you to check them out as they are quite short and well summarized, so you can learn the basics of the game in no time. Today I will continue with the explanation for the basic and core things about the game, but we will have to dig a bit deeper in the information well. The reason for that will be the perks, which will be our main topic, and since they are quite a lot and the potential combinations are many, we will need a bit more time to cover and explain most of them, or at least the most common ones used in the endgame. Of course, before going into the build setups, I first must say thank you to all of the ones who supported and are still supporting the channel. If you also want to be part of our journey, feel free to subscribe here in YouTube, join our Discord community as well as all the other platforms for which you can find the links in the description below. Okay, so we have on our plate for today the perks of New World. This is the name of all different bonuses that come from your armor pieces, jewelries and weapons in the game, and the more you have from them, the higher the quality of the item will be. Attribute stats are also considered as perks, but we will not review them today as they are quite simple and self-explanatory. If an item has one perk plus the attribute stats, it will be considered as rare and it will have a blue color. If there are 2 perks plus the attributes, it will be epic and simply the color will be purple. And if there are 3 perks plus the attribute stats, it will be legendary with orange looking color. There are small exceptions when it comes to perks when we speak about artifacts and shields, but for the purpose of the video we will not go into those specific details as the system works the same way for them. As mentioned already, all the perks in New World are quite a lot and the amount of combinations between them are probably more than a couple hundred. This however doesn't change the fact that some perks are way better than others and due to that they have specific purposes. Really important thing to know about the perks is that they are the most important piece of any structured build and not the gear score. Contrary to other games, gear score in New World is not the most important element as it will have almost no impact on your outcomes. Meanwhile, the perks with their value and correct combinations will be the driving force of your success, and that's why they should always come on first place when you aim to create your builds. This doesn't mean that the gear score is completely useless, but the small difference of attributes or single-digit percentages of perk power will not lean the scale for any of your builds. With that info out of the way, let's go ahead and check all the perks, their respective buckets, and of course, their usefulness in different combinations. What you see on your screens is the site called New World Database, and this is basically the best friend of every New World player. The reason for that is because this site contains all of the useful data for items, perks, different buffs and debuffs, effects and whatever not related to the game. Now, as we're gonna speak about perks, I will go over different examples and the first one will be the sword and the different perks for it. As we can see on the bottom, there are different things and one thing that we can notice are the perks and the distribution of them. Every perk has its own name, own icon, percent of chance, probability to be crafted or obtained by the world, and of course the labels or the so-called perk buckets are something that we need to highly pay attention to. The reason for paying attention to the perk buckets is because we cannot have more than one perk from the same bucket applied to the same weapon. This means that if we want to craft an item and we want to apply the perk Keenly Empowered, all the other perks that are sharing the same perk bucket, in this case Keenly Jacked, Lifestealing, Refreshing Move, and maybe some others if we scroll down to the bottom, they will not be able to proc as random perk or they cannot be added forcefully with the application of the perk mods, simply because they cannot coexist. There are a couple of different artifacts and also named items in the game that are an exception, but those are extremely rare cases, so I will not go over them. Now, another thing that we can see is that different weapons have different perks as well. For example, the sword will have one type of perks that can be applied to it, but if we go to the fire staff, for example, and I will take a second just to find it. This is the life staff, but it's, I believe, the same thing. We can see that there are also different perks, especially for the life staff because it's a healing weapon. So you can see that all of the perks that exist under there are different. Also, Alacritus Punishment can only be applied to ranged magical weapons. Another thing that you can see also in this table is those mod in red brackets, let's say. This means that this perk can only be applied when a craft is made with a mod for this perk. What I mean by this is that if you go to the crafting station and you don't choose to have one of those here, they will never be able to proc as a random perk in your craft. If you want to have them, you must have the perk mode and then you need to apply it for your craft. This is really important because when you're aiming to get your perfect gear or specific items, you have to take that in consideration and in mind. Now, how to create the perfect gear can be many different ways. One of them, of course, is if you craft with Gorgonite inductors, which are giving you the chance to choose all your 3 perks. But if you are not going for that option, and let's say that you are using the schematics, which are allowing you to craft only with 1 perk, you can see the different probabilities as I've mentioned. So for example, if we lock in Savior, we will see what are the chances for all the other perks to acquire our weapon. Now, if we go to the next schematics, which would be the shields, here you can see kind of the same pattern. You have different perks, you have different chances. Basically, everything stays the same. This pattern also can be seen for the schematics of all different type of shields and of course the jewelries. Now, one thing that I want to really mention is that every specific item in the game, either that be a weapon, a shield, armor piece or jewelry piece, has its own uniqueness and basically it can provide bonuses that other things cannot really do. For example, we are currently looking at a schematic for an amulet, and as you can see there is different types of protection: Void, Trust, Slash, Arcane and so on. Now, if I want to choose those for my amulet, it wouldn't be a problem. But if I go to the earring and I look at the perk bucket there, I would not find those same perks. I would find other ones which amulet, for example, would not have, such as Fortifying Toast, Empowering Toast, and so on. There are common perks as Refreshing, which is the perfect example, that exist in all pieces of armor gear with the exception of weapons. So that's why creating a specific build and the combination of the perks should be really a thoughtful process and should be not rushed with like 5 minutes. One thing to mention also is that the weapons are usually the offensive perk holders for any build, but the ring is playing almost the same role because the ring can have those different damage types, which are mostly applied to your damage as well. Now, last thing to mention, of course, is the armor. Most of the armor pieces have similar perk buckets because they have different protection types, such as Elemental Aversion, Shirking Fortification, Enchanted Ward, and so on. They also have some offensive bonuses like the Harnessing, which is standing here, and they also of course have the different skill of respective weapon that you are currently using, so you can choose to not slot it on your weapons, but probably you want to slot it on your armor pieces. Now, how and what we should do in order to achieve the perfect balance of a build, then we go for the next site that I want to share with you, and this is New World Buddy. This is a really friendly site which will allow you to create different builds to theory craft and to see at the end the whole bonus and structure or maybe potential weakness in your build, and you can simply change all the different pieces in a matter of a second, so you can of course rearrange your builds for the specific purpose. You can just create a new and then use the name, let's say test build, and then when you create it, the game will literally give you all of the different tools, so you can, sorry, not the game, the site will give you the tools necessary to create your build. You can choose a headpiece just by searching for a specific item, and then you can use light piece, medium, heavy, with magnify, without magnify, and so on. Now, just to show you a complete build of mine, which is again a testing purpose, you can see how it looks. Here you can put your skill trees for the 2 weapons of choice. Here you can choose all of your artifacts, gear pieces, and so on. And under it you can see as well the different perks. So that would be the way to go. Of course, when you are done and when you're finished with all of the inputs, you can scroll back up and you can see what are your perks stacking currently and what is the total value of all of them. For example, in this build for the moment I have 3 enchanted wards, 4 invigorated perks, 5 shirking heal perks, and so on. If I want to change something, I can just go down, I can click on a perk that I want to change, and I can put, for example, another one that I want to use. This will automatically replace the old perk. Then if I scroll back up, I will see that now from 5 shirking heals, I only have 4. Now, I know that it might seem quite important and at the same time quite hard, but believe me, with a little bit of practice, you will be able to understand and to use those sites for your advantage. In order to know which perks you want to slot in, now I will continue with explanation for all of the different perks for their respective gear and why some of them are more important than others. Alright guys, so there we are, starting off with the damage absorption perks, which are applicable to our armor pieces, and some of them might be good and some of them might be bad, but I will just say a few words for each of them and why I think one or few are really good compared to the others and why some should be exclusively avoided at all cost. The first one, and I think that the best one currently, is the Enchanted Ward perk. This one gives you a reduction of damage for light and heavy attacks of 4%, and it doesn't specify if it's magic or not, and therefore it's applicable to all types of damages, which are of course applied by light and heavy attacks. This is one of the main reasons why I believe that this perk is the best when it comes to defensive, because it can protect you from both physical and elemental type of damages. On the other hand, the physical version and the elemental version are only protecting you from ranged attacks of physical and elemental types, and that's why I think that they are really down here at the bottom, because they are really used for niche builds which are just focusing one type of damage mitigator, and that's why I don't think they are so good. Now, looking at the remaining 3 perks, we have Grit Ward, which will provide you with protection of 3% whenever you have active grit, which was lately, I believe, reduced even to 2.6%. We have also Hasted Vigor, which will provide us with a movement speed whenever we have some dots on us. And then we have, of course, the Shirking Fortification, which will increase our defenses in the form of armor and elemental armor whenever we dodge an attack. Now, I personally believe that all 3 of them can be used in different builds depending on your weapon, depending on your playstyle. If you play as a frontliner and you have a lot of grit attacks or maybe even grit abilities, maybe Grit Ward can be your choice. Or if you have a lot of dodges, a lot of energy to use or stamina, then basically maybe Shirking Fortification will be good. And of course the Hasted Vigor is preferred case for a lot of assassins, especially blunderbusses for example, that are willing to trade a little bit just so they can have that extra movement speed for chasing potential and of course for kiting. So that's why I think that all those 3 can be slotted between B and A section, and since we don't have something in between, I will just put them like this, and then you can choose which one can be on top of the others and so on. The next perk bucket on the list is the one for the damage con. As you can see, we have 6 different perks and they are all tied up to different elements, and all of them are coded with the respective element and then harnessing. So for example, in the order that you see them from left to right, we have fire harnessing, ice harnessing, lightning harnessing, nature, void and arcane harnessing. Now, those perks eventually at some point were quite powerful, especially for some different builds, mostly on the damage side, but of course lately with the change of the meta and the shift towards more tankiness and more frontlining, those perks kinda fell apart and only a handful of builds are currently using them. I would say that of course the main damage types of fire, lightning and in some cases void are the priority, but there is really no distinctive line where you can say that the others are not worth it. The main goal here is that if you use a fire staff, you would want to go with fire, then if you use a bolt caster, you would go with lightning, and then of course if you use the life taker with a musket for example, or a bow on the side, you would go for void. Like I said, currently the meta is not really suited for those perks, but if you go to use them, I would say that they all fell in the same category, which would be the A tier. And then of course it depends mostly on your priorities when it comes to damage. You can pick and choose which one of them would suit you the best. The next perk bucket that we are looking at is the Debuff Duration one. Now I know that you see 3 similarly looking icons, and those are for Invigorated, Vigor and Freedom perks. For some reason they still have the same icons in the game, even Refreshing and some other refreshing perks have the same icon, so I'm not sure if AGS will eventually change them in the future, but have that in mind while listening and watching to this. The other 2 perks are Potent Energy and Potent Alacrity, which will give us respectively reduction of exhaust status effects and then increased potency of haste effects. Now, I personally think that all those perks are nice in their niche, but in general, for the most common builds, they don't really find any practical usage. Lately, there was a lot of speculations and of course a lot of builds related to Invigorated, for example, and with the use of the Jin Headwrap artifact, you can reach more than 80% of reduction of debuffs, and this is exactly what Invigorated does, it removes the debuffs from you. So with this one you can definitely make a build in which you have almost no debuffs on you running, but of course, as I said, this is quite niche and not that much practical for all the other builds. This is why I would say that Invigorated can be somewhere in between A and S tier, with the potential of course to go to S tier if you definitely go for the Headwrap artifact build. Now, looking at the Potent Energy and the Potent Alacrity, since it's not a direct buff towards the mitigation of exhaust effects or direct buff towards your haste effects and is just a fraction or a percent of it, I would say that those 2 perks are completely useless because you are basically limited in the amount of perks that you can have on your gear, so slotting them just for a fraction is not really justified at all, and I for myself couldn't even find a single build that is worth a while with those perks included. Now, the remaining Vigor and Freedom perks are definitely interesting as well. The Vigor can be also used the same way as Invigorated to reduce the dot effects, which will basically remove all the dots from you. But since the game lately is focused on burst damage and not so much on dot damage, I would have to say that Vigor probably goes somewhere in the middle in the B sector and not so much higher, while Freedom is probably one of the best perks when it comes to healers, when it comes to bruisers, and since those 2 roles are a core component from the big scale PvP New World, I can definitely say that Freedom is a top tier perk. Of course, this is not applicable to all classes, because if you for example play a ranged with a musket or a fire staff or a bow, you don't necessarily need Freedom, as you probably you would avoid most of the things that Freedom is countering. But for all of those melees, for all of those frontliners, this is definitely a must-have perk. The next perk bucket that we are looking at, and it's quite funny to be fair with those three crosses, is the one for the health. Now, like I said, many perks have really similar, if not the same icons, and this is indeed the fact with all three perks from the health perk bucket. The first one is the Anointed Lifesteal, which will provide us 4% increased healings from lifesteals. The other one will be Anointed Potions, which is providing us with 3% increased healings from all consumables. And of course the last one is the health itself, which will provide us with 2.4% of the base value from our health. Now, in some cases, the health perk itself, which is providing 2.4% of the base HP, is quite a good choice, especially for PvE, because it gives a bigger pool of health when it comes to fighting mobs. I would personally say that it's a S tier for PvE and maybe down to A tier when it comes to PvP, but of course dependent on the builds. Now for the other two perks, same as the previous anointed perks, I feel like the amount of bonus that you get from them is definitely not comparable to the other perks, and therefore I think that they are not really a suitable option. If they were providing a nice bonus that was direct and not a percentage of a certain bonus, then I think that they would have been higher in the tier list, but with their current stand, I just think that they are not useful at all. The next one on the line will be two different perk buckets, but they are working almost the same identical way, so that's why we're gonna look at them all together. The first one is the physical and the other one is elemental, and if you are wondering what exactly they are doing, is just a type of protection or the so-called conditionings. Now, as we can see, there are four elements which are fire, ice, nature and void. Those are the four conditionings that we currently have in the game, simply because they are obtained by the different types of mutation, and since we only have 4 types of mutation at that point, we have only 4 out of the 6 elements. The other 3 perks are the different conditionings for physical, which is slash, strike and trust, and of course this is for all the melee weapons that are applying those type of damages. Now, I personally believe that those conditioning perks are quite strong, especially for some cases, because they can mitigate 5% direct damage from the type of damage that is applied. So for example, if I have flame conditioning and somebody hits me with fire damage, regardless of the source of it, it could be a fire staff or a blunderbuss or just a perk from his kit, then this perk will be activated and for the next 5 seconds I will take 5% less damage from that fire type of source. Now, this works the same with all the others, but as we can tell, and as we already discussed, there are certain types of damage that are more applied and like more common, and then we have some types of damage which are not so common, and then the niche is kinda too small. And those type of damages, as we can imagine, are of course ice and nature, and that's why those two conditioning types, I would kind of put them at the very bottom down there, because they are really not worth it to be set on our gear. And then looking at the most common ones, or at least the ones that are mostly used in our current meta, this would be the slash, which is highly recommended to have if you have the chance, because there is way too many sword and shields, catchets, great swords, even great axes using a slash type of damage, so this is really common used damage. And then we have fire staff, which is really also common one, especially in the OPR games or even your arenas. Then we have void, which is also significantly stronger than before, and we know that a lot of people are using void gauntlets either from a range or from close distance with void blades. And then I would say that Trust and Strike are going on right under the S tier, going into A or maybe A+, simply because there is still quite a lot of spear users, quite a lot of bow users, and of course rapiers that are using the Trust damage, but also all of the bruisers, for example, are mainly using strike damage, so for them having the strike protection, strike conditioning, sorry, is quite a good thing. The next perk bucket that we're gonna take a look at is the one that is triggered on kill. All 5 perks in front of you are basically providing bonuses only after a kill of a PvE enemy or a PvP player. Now the first one is Mortal Lifesteal, and lately it was changed with a little bit of addition to the 8% maximum health on kill to also give 2% lifesteal. In specific combinations this perk can be quite useful, so that's why I will give it an A tier. The next one is Mortal Empowerment, which basically gives you 12% empower after a kill for 20 seconds. Due to the fact that there is way too many sources of empower, I personally think that this perk should not be slotted in any of your gear, simply because it's not worth the slot, and that's why I will put it in the D tier. Then we have Mortal Energy, which should give you 35 stamina on kill. Again, the same idea goes here. 35 stamina is a really nice amount, but if we have to consider how many kills we do per minute, I don't think that you would be able to use it quite efficiently, so that's why I would also put it in the D tier. The next one is Mortal Fortification, which again, the same way as the others, will give you 22% fortify for 20 seconds after a kill, but I don't need to explain to you that kills are not happening that quickly, so therefore this perk goes to the bin. And of course, last but not least, Mortal Refreshment will reduce all of your cooldowns by 8% and again on kill, so therefore it also goes to the D because it's just not worth it and it's definitely not the best. And the last couple of perks that we have all summarized together here are from different categories or from different perk buckets, but due to the fact that they are single entries, meaning that there is no other perks in their perk buckets, we will discuss all of them all together and we will see which ones can be used, where we can slot them and so on, and why some of them should probably not be used at all. The first one that we have here is the Hardcore Parkour, which will give us 18% haste for 5 seconds after triggering a traversal action. Now, triggering a traversal action means that you either climb over a wall or something like that, or you just climb, I don't know, a ladder that is on top of you. It's not really useful perk, let's say, especially if you are getting chased by people. You would not really have the chance to go and climb somewhere or jump over a fence just so you can trigger it. So I would definitely put this down in the D tier because for me this perk is completely useless. Then the next one is the Refreshing, and as you probably see they all have similar icons to other perks as well. But the next one is the Refreshing. I would say that this perk is really good, and then of course depending on the type of class that you are playing, it could be a mandatory or a really good choice for a last third perk. Now in my opinion every mage and every healer should have this perk always slotted, meaning that the maximum of 4 refreshings should be achieved, as this will give you a total of 16% cooldown reduction and it would have a really nice impact. But of course, if you have another weapon in your kit and you are playing as a frontliner, refreshing might not be the case. So that's why I would put A tier for the refreshing, as it will be a mandatory pick for some builds, but for some it would not be that well. Then we have the Shirking Heals, which is a perk that will trigger healing effects whenever you dodge an enemy attack, and there will be an internal cooldown of around 7 seconds. Now, in my opinion, this is one of the best perks when it comes to solo survivability, and if you don't have a group or you are playing alone and there is no healers around, this perk might be the best savior in that case. I personally love it. I also see it in many different builds, so I personally think that this is a top tier perk, all-rounded, well suited for all types of builds, so that's why Shirking Heals goes to the S tier. Now we have the last perk here, which is really nicely looking, and this is the Luck. Now for some of you that know the game already well, this is just a joke, but of course I need to clear it out for the people that are still new and don't really know. In some games, the Luck is basically providing you with the chance of missing an enemy attack or a chance to, let's say, miss an enemy crowd control effect or silence or whatever. Since New World is fully action combat and there is no top target, luck here doesn't work in the same way as other games. Luck in New World is only used whenever you go in PvE, and it will basically give a small boost to your chance of obtaining a more rare item by either killing mobs or just opening boxes. So therefore the luck perk, when it comes to PvP or even in PvE, it's not really that good. Also, there is a completely different topic of discussion about the luck. Is it worth it? Is it working properly? And should we even invest in it? But regardless of that, I think that the luck perk just goes to the D tier as well. As you can see, the existing perks in the game are quite a lot, and we have only gone through the ones for the armor pieces. Now I believe it is even more evident that the combinations for your builds have high importance, and therefore it is crucial to have the proper setup if you want to achieve high performance. As I don't want to take more of your time, and I also want to give you some time to digest the information from today, I will leave the perks for the different weapons and jewelries for another video. If you are left with more questions than answers, I would like to help you in that regard, so please shoot in the comments or in our Discord community server. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you on the next one.